Yeah, so my name is Fofanah, and what I'm currently doing, I have to kind of realize that I am in it and I'm doing it because at one point it was just an inspiration. But what I'm doing essentially is I am helping the minority women-owned business community and teaching them skill sets that will allow them to monetize their creativity, their business in the online and digital media world. So I do that currently through a marketing accelerator called Power Your Launch. And the goal is to teach them skills to be able to make sales in their business. And so that's what my current focus is to help people get to the bag. So I think the desire to do what I'm currently doing. I remember hearing Tristan Walker of Bevel at that time, and Walker and Company. He used to say, I'm uniquely positioned to run this type of business because I have firsthand experience, I've been around it. Or hearing Tyler Perry talk about how he's uniquely positioned to tell the stories that he tells because when he was growing up and his mom was going through abuse and his neighbors and things, like he used to tell jokes jokes to lighten up her mood and to make her laugh. And so for me, being around a single parent, African black woman who refuged here from Sierra Leone, West Africa, to try to have a better life for her and her 7 kids, I seen a lot of the opportunities that she was denied. And knowing that she was denied that, and a lot of times because she was a woman, because she was black woman, and I said, you know what, I remember being young and wanting to go get a job at like 8, 9 years old to try to help my mom. But as I would get older, I was like, well, what ways can I impact someone? Oh, I could teach them a skill. If I teach them a skill, then no one has control on how much they can make. No one has control in the value they could provide. And so I started leaning towards skill building and helping teach people skill building because I've seen firsthand a lot of the things my mom was denied, and even today, right? Women that are in my life, I was raised by a village of women, but I think that really motivated the interest and there was alignment, so I felt like I was uniquely positioned to do that. To working at Fortune 500 corporate, and then I left again. And so I started really early just sharpening my skills back in like 2008, 2009. This is when advertisement first came out on these social platforms, but I saw where the puck was going to be. I said, if they're collecting all this data on people using these platforms that are free, then what can you do with that data? Like, can you get back in front of these customers? Can you talk to your customers in a different way? So I took off my consumer hat and I put on my CEO hat and said, how can I leverage these platforms? So I kind of saw it where it was going before a lot of the people around me. There were many times when people would tell me, when I was starting on this adventure, that like I said, my professors thought that, it was a fad. A lot of my peers didn't really understand what I was saying, and, it almost felt like I was crazy. And so it was like, I'm Paul Revere telling them, hey, the British are coming, and everyone's looking at me like I'm crazy. And you're crazy until you're right, and then you're a genius. And so that's essentially what happened. But during that time, I had to really, it wasn't easy betting on myself or having the confidence to say, I know this to be 100% true. It was really a gut feeling, and I said, what's the worst that could happen? If I do all this and, I end up graduating college, I'll leave with a degree like everybody else. If I do all this and it doesn't succeed, I've learned a lot of skills along the way. And so with me, I looked at it as the glass half full. And I think sometimes when you have a gut feeling, you have to be so, positive around it that you radiate and you nurture the soil, right? Like, you could have a plant, but if you only water it and it receives no sunlight, it won't grow. If you only give it sunlight and you don't water it, it doesn't grow. So 2 things have to be true. You have to have this conviction about it, and then you have to be so positive and your self-talk and, whatever people say, you have to have this level of resilience where you're able to say, you know what, let me just listen to myself a little bit longer, like one more day, like one more day. And so for me, it was challenging, you know, as my friends went to corporate and started making a lot of money, I thought I was behind. I thought I chose the wrong path. But, you know, those who laugh first sometimes don't laugh last. So when I started to really get in the groove of growing my business, and so now I've had a proof of concept, I was making some money, and now it was like, okay, can I grow it? I remember, so this was around 2019, I was starting, you know, another venture, and I had two decisions. My mentor, really one decision. I was at my mentor's house, him and his wife, we were out around the dinner table, and I had just left my job, so they were trying to figure out what I was gonna do next. And it was like, well, the direct path is going to grad school. And I was like, well, I kind of started this thing on the side, and I was trying to come up with a scenario where they would be acceptance of that, because I value their opinion. And so I told them, hey, I just launched this thing and I made $18,000 on the first launch. I was like, I didn't even start it yet. Like, people paid me $18K to just let them know when I started. And they were like, wait, what? They didn't really understand the online world. You know, that wasn't their thing. I mean, they were brilliant people. I mean, Harvard Law, right? So brilliant people. And so I was trying to explain to them, I think there's an opportunity here. You know, based on my skill set, I think I can teach business owners how to, you know, really leverage their business online to market themselves better and to make more sales and increase their visibility. And so they were like, yeah, just like also focus on studying and getting the applications done. So I was like, all right, so in my mind, I was like, okay, I gotta prove to them that this could be viable. And so the next launch we did, I made 12,000. So I was like, dang, I'm going in the other direction. Maybe they were right. And so I was like, let me go, you know, I always pull up the Panera. I'd always be studying in my corner. And I was like, okay, let me just test it out in February. February rolls around, I make about 30K. And I'm like, wait a second, okay, I equaled what I made in January. March rolls around and I think I made like almost like 48,000. So I was like, okay, now it's trending in the right direction. So for me, it was just myself, because I wasn't ready to bring someone else on, because I didn't really know if this was how the lifespan of this business. And so I remember I hired an accountant, because I'm like, okay, I just got a lot of cash. I need to figure out what I'm gonna do. So I hired an accountant, and she's like, well, how much do you think you could make this year in this business? And I was like, I don't know, maybe 200,000, maybe $200,000. And I was like, I'm running a really profitable business because I'm selling digital goods. The only thing that costs me right now is my time. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't count their time into the cost. And it took a lot of my time. And there were systems I had to pay for, tools I had, automations I had to make sure were right. Was customer service, answering emails all night to the hour, because we were getting clients from all over the world. And so I was like, $200,000. 6 months in, I made way over $200,000. So we came back to the table, and now I had, to my mentors, I said, hey, like, look what I've been able to do. I've been able to make over $500,000 in 6 months. And they were like, wait a second, doing what? And I tried to explain to them again, it's doing the same thing I had told them earlier. So they said, okay, maybe you should test this out a little bit longer. And I was like, okay. And that first like $500,000 I made, I was probably like 65% was about profit. And so this is a high profit business. And so then the other was accounting, the other 35% accounted for tax and also systems. And I should have hired right then. But I told myself, I was like, oh, I got this. But although I was literally spending 12 to 14 hours, if not 18 hours a day on this when I made $500,000. So I couldn't see it because I was still looking at the trees. I couldn't see the forest. And so after the first year, I hit $1 million, but it was the hardest million that I've ever worked for in my life. And I was like, okay, now it's time to hire, because either I'm gonna end up in at the hospital, or I'm gonna have to like get people to help me so to leverage a lot of this pain that I'm currently in this transition. Yeah, I think for me, when it came to hiring, because I had ran a company when I was in college, and it was just a clothing business to people, but to me, it taught me everything I needed to know. Because in that clothing business, I had hired people, I had fired people. Like that was my first inkling of running a business. So it's like when you take a test the second time and it's the same exact one, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of have an idea of where things should go. And it helped me tremendously. So I knew, one, don't build a business and don't hire people just to say you have a team. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, is that they want to appear to be a company, but you're not a company. There's a difference between a startup and a company. A company has clearly defined its processes to generate revenue, activities, and they know how to scale, right? That's a company. A startup, you're trying to figure everything out. So you can't be a startup and operate like a company. And this is where the biggest gap with entrepreneurs are, because they start something, they're like, I want to be like Nike. I'm like, you can't be like Nike. You have to look at where Nike was, where you were at that time. And so for me, when I looked at my business and I looked at, well, where am I spending most of my time? I had to take an audit of myself. And I started tracking my activity. And I said, okay, I'm spending all my time in the inbox, and I can't really get anything done because I'm spending 4 or 5 hours in the inbox. And then if they have a question that I haven't built, then I got to go build it. And the second thing was, okay, if I need to hire and grow, I need someone to capture all the steps and procedures. So I'm going to hire customer service to manage the inbox and an operation person to start thinking ahead of what's it look like if we were to hire a team, and then the statement of work, a statement of processes that we needed to create in order to accommodate the new team members that we would be eventually hiring. So that's where I went, right? I went with someone, the two things that was taking up most of my time, and I went in that direction of hiring for that. So for me, that first million was hard. That first 100,000 was hard. Like that first 10,000 was hard because I was trying to replace my job income because I needed an income, right, to prove to my mentors. So here I am trying to build a business plan just for my mentors so they could like, okay, this is a good plan, idea. So for me, the first 10,000 a month consistently was hard because that meant I had to get clients consistently. So that means the next month I had to do a lot of marketing activities in order to acquire customers. And I was still trying to figure out what my customer acquisition cost was, how much am I spending on marketing, what process should they follow in order to become a customer, what the customer journey flow was. So that first 10,000 was challenging. The first 100,000, the next threshold was $100,000. 100,000 from 10K was easier because I just multiplied my efforts in 10K. I stayed up later, right? I got on the phone a lot more, right? I multiplied those efforts. And because I got on the phone a lot to the first 100K, I learned a lot of my customers and clients' needs. Okay, this is how they want things to be positioned. Okay, I need to add a video on my checkout page because they need to see a video. Okay, I need to give them the ability to schedule a call because there's a lot of people saying that they're gonna help them grow their business online and they don't know if this is real, if this is a scam. Like, I need to make sure that they have the ability to access and get on the phone with me. And so that first 100K was challenging in a way because it required a lot of manual labor. For me, it required me getting on the phone, and that's hard to scale a business if you're having to get on the phone and talk to every single customer that is interested in your business. And so then going from like 100K to $1 million, and I know the exact moment where I crossed $1 million because I was at my friend's kickback, my friend Kevin, and I was at his kickback. He just moved into his brand new house, so he had a kickback in his backyard. And I remember exactly the person that purchase that brought me over $1 million. Shout out to Jennifer, wherever you are in the world. And I remember we were at the kickback and I got this sale and I was like, oh my God. And they're like, what happened? And these are some of my childhood friends. I was like, I just crossed over 1 million. They're like, 1 million and what? Like they couldn't wrap their mind around it. And because when we were kids and we were, dreaming, we were like, oh my God, if I could just make 1 million, I'd be rich and I'd be able to take care of everybody and, I'll be able to build my own community and things like that. And that first million I hit, I was not rich. I was doing a lot better than where I was, but that first million was all tax, right? It was all expenses, all mistakes that I made. That first million, I probably took home about maybe $90,000 in my salary. And in the business, I left about 90K. So at the end of the year, that first million was left with 180,000 after everything. Tax, after all the mistakes that I made, like wrong business structures, like hiring consultants who thought that they could take my business to X level and, giving money to friends and family because we made it, right? I helped raise you. What are you gonna do to contribute now, And all the phone calls I would receive would be about money. So that first million was hard because I didn't know how to manage it. Like I didn't know what I didn't know. And so at the end of the year, it was 180,000, 90,000 I paid myself. So I didn't pay myself that entire year. I was living off of my savings from my corporate position that I just left. So I was very lean. I was making pasta, eating ramen, dollar slices, because I was between New York and Philly, so I'd go, get the dollar slices, like, okay, how many dollar slices? If I eat one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, the big slices, that's $3 a day. And so I didn't pay myself, and then 90,000 I left in the business to then hire people at the top of the year. So those are sort of like the different thresholds. So I quickly realized how much you make isn't what you take home. And there's a really big difference, like what do you take home is completely different than how much you actually make. And so when I made 1 million, my friends thought I was a millionaire, but I'm like, nah, I ain't a millionaire. Like to me, a millionaire is when you actually go to your bank account and your net worth, right, is 1 million, not how much your business just made in sales, how much you grossed. And so I think there's a big difference when entrepreneurs, how they structure their business, and when they set goals based off of sales, right? They don't set goals based off what's my margin? What's a healthy margin for my business? And so that second year I said, okay, how do I operate at 50% margin or above? And so that changed my mindset after, but again, I wouldn't have known it if I didn't experience it. Yeah, for me, I think if you're trying to exponentially increase your learning, like definitely finding a mentor, right? And I think someone that is a few steps ahead of you, meaning that, because you want someone that could stretch you and challenge you. You don't want someone that's gonna take it easy on you. Again, you have different mentors for different things, right? The second thing I would say is you want to find community of people that have normalized conversation around wealth and scaling. And so for me, it was, when I would go to different conferences, I would try to find conferences where there were entrepreneurs there, right? So I would say look for conferences where it's entrepreneurial. Black Tech Week is a perfect example, right? Like look for those type of conferences. And another thing I would say is I became an avid reader, meaning that every morning I read about 75 articles, right? So this is of current events, of things in my industry, things in complementary industries. I just needed to learn a lot because if I was in the rooms of networking opportunities, I wanted to make sure that if it's a person I wanted to talk to, I had the ability to have a conversation, but also I knew what was happening in my industry as well. The fourth thing I did was I aligned with podcasts, because again, maybe you don't have access to that person. So I aligned with different podcasts that I would listen to. You have good ones that are storytelling based, like How I Built This, or you have, My First Million, you have Your First Million with Arlen and Hamilton, which is again, another really good podcast. And so I would start aligning myself with podcasts because it felt to me I was having the conversations with them. I'd listen to like Recode, Decode with Kara Swisher, because she would interview the Mark Zuckerberg, she would interview the Elon Musk. And with me, I was like, how do they think, right? She's asking them a question, why did they respond to it that way? Because I would have responded to it differently. And so I started to try to create a framework as well. The fifth thing I did was I created my value system. What are the things that I value? Because now when I don't have a lot of time, I have to be able to make decisions quickly. And so the value system became a compass. And your values are really based on the things that you believe, the things you're unwilling to compromise on. So for me, if I felt like I couldn't trust, like trust was one of my values. If I felt like I couldn't trust someone I'm gonna hire, then I don't need to be hiring them. If I'm worried about, what if they steal my account information, then that means that I don't need to be hiring that person. It was very clear and evident. So what is your compass? What's your value system? Because this allows you to make really quick decisions, because when you're operating a CEO, you have payroll, you have people, you have clients, you have customers, you need to be able to make decisions rather quickly. And so that really helped me out creating this value system. Integrity is another one of it, right? Okay, we're gonna do this the right way. There ain't no shortcuts, because if we take a shortcut, we're gonna have to come back to the starting point. It's funny because when I first started on this path of trying to impact and help people, coming from corporate, one of the biggest challenges I had working there was I couldn't see my impact. So when I started doing this, I could see my impact individually, right? Like I could see the impact that I was making. I never thought about like, okay, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, what's the impact, what's my imprint on this world? I never thought about those conversations until like I'd be out in public, I'd be at an airport, I'd be eating at Chick-fil-A, and people would run up on me that are students of mine. And they tell me their stories of like how they're able to put their 2 weeks notice in, how they're able to, employ other people, how they were able to, I had a student that did $3 million in a year, and when they literally saw me, they had bought me a Rollie, and I'm like, I can't accept, but and so for me, sometimes I don't realize the impact that I'm making because I'm so in it of trying to help the next person that I don't realize the depth of impact I've had on that one individual. When I think about my impact 50 years from now, I think what I'm doing is, and what I've been doing, and my mentors is say, it's okay to turn around to see the progress you've made, the imprints that you've left. With me, I've been so focused on the goal sometimes that I forget that there's a journey. And I learned that recently, because when I hit my goal and then when I got to the next destination, I realized there's a new destination and the destinations don't ever stop. So how do I embrace the impact that I'm currently having, and how do I look forward at the same time looking forward to what's the imprint I could have? And so for me, it's whenever people are telling me that I've impacted their life, their economic opportunities. That's why I started it. I wanted them to be in control of how much they can make. I didn't want anyone else to let them know that they couldn't have this opportunity because they are a woman or they're a black woman. And obviously no one's gonna tell you that directly, but you have a pretty good idea why you're not getting these type of opportunities. So for me, it's to have them be empowered economically, right? And so they can make their own decisions. So I think that's the imprint I'll have when it's all said and done. Like, if there's one thing Abu taught us, was how to market ourselves and how to monetize and how to get after the bag. The best piece of advice that I received that I didn't take, man, there's so many. I think that one of my mentors told me a long time ago that it's okay to put myself first. And the culture I grew up in, didn't really allow for that. I grew up in a culture where everyone came before you. Your first few paychecks, you have to split it amongst the family, right? And so in that type of culture, in that type of environment, you never really think about yourself. And so when I first started making money, I would give it out because I was like, oh, I felt like I owed these people. Oh, I owed them, right? They raised me, they were there, right? And the more money I made, the more cousins I had, right? I didn't know I had that big of a family. And so what I kept doing, I had this avoidance strategy. Okay, if I just give it to them, then like everyone will be happy. And the issue with that was I never put my own needs first. I remember someone had asked me, they had asked me two questions. The first question was, how did you reward yourself? What did you buy yourself? And I was like, oh, I bought these AirPods. And they're like, okay, what else? I'm like, no, that's all I bought. They're like, so you made all this money, you're giving it to everybody, but like you've only bought yourself AirPods. And I'm like, yeah, like it's so cool. Like I spent $250 and they're like, Abu, you don't see something wrong with this picture? Like you're not putting yourself first. And then the second thing they asked me was, what's making you happy, or how are you finding joy that isn't attached to making other people happy, isn't attached to making other people's dreams or wishes come true? And that was the hardest question I ever had to answer, because everything that I could think of was because I am impacting someone else. There was nothing that I could think of that was just for me, the things I was just doing for me. And so for me, that's one of the advice that I didn't listen to. And it took me a while, to listen to that. And when I finally turned around and came around to listening to that, the first thing, I did was, okay, I need to find a therapist, right? I need to create distance between myself and people that are just really comfortable asking me for these type of things. And so it's hard because it was against how I grew up. It was against my DNA, but I started seeing that as something that was stunting my growth as a person, as a CEO. It was one of the most difficult things I had to do, and I had to create habits around it. One of the biggest habits that came out of that is I'm on Do Not Disturb 24/7, because I remember monitoring my calls, and 98% of the calls I'd get were people asking me for money. And so it became really hard because I didn't know what people's intent were. Dating became hard, right? You don't know what people's intents are, and so what you do is you kind of hide yourself so you're not accessible. So it's still something I'm working through to this day. Yeah, so I think for me, one of the things that's really had a big impact and shifted, I think in the midst of everything, when I was sort of like starting to scale, the biggest thing that I learned was, people say, you have the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce, as Oprah. And technically it's true, but it's really not true, right? Meaning that they have more resources they could leverage. They have more people they could delegate to, so they can maximize their 24 hours a lot differently. And so for me, one of the things was really learning how to delegate. Delegation is a practice. Delegation is a skill. Because a lot of times, like, let me just do it. Like, when you hit that point, you're like, let me just do it. But if I did it, it would have been done the right way. But the reason why I say delegation and the nugget that was taught to me was the way you multiply time is you spend time today and you can multiply it later. So if I teach someone, and here's a basic example of that. I can either every month log into all my accounts and pay my bills. That's gonna take me time. It'll take me probably about an hour. Or I could set up an automation. I could say, hey, just go ahead and take money out of my account every month. So now when the next month comes, I don't spend that same hour. But the first month I spend an hour setting everything up. Month 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and in perpetuity, I didn't spend any more time. But again, you spend time today. The way you multiply time, you spend time today setting everything up so you can multiply time later. Here's another example of that. When you hire someone, it is frustrating in the beginning because you're trying to train them, but you're like, I could just do this, it'll take me 2 seconds. But those 2 seconds keep adding up. And those 2 seconds break your focus. Those 2 seconds break, what you can be doing to grow the business, what you can be doing to be better, but you're continuously spending 2 seconds coming back in the business. And so I had to realize, you know what, let me just train them. I know it's gonna take a lot of upfront time, but once they learn it, then it doesn't take me any much more time, for us to execute these tasks. So that sort of goes hand in hand. There's delegation and multiplying time. I think, 5 years from now, if we met up, what would I be doing? That's a really great question, because I'm trying to figure that out myself, but I know that eventually I want to have a portfolio and have operators that operate that portfolio of companies, right? That's the goal for me. And personally, I think what I would do is I'd probably just travel and write books. I've written a few books that I've never released, and so I would probably just travel, write books, gather my thoughts, and I really like silence for some strange reason. The older I get, I'm like, man, I could really just sit here and think, and that's a luxury. Like, that's literally a luxury to have everything, your rent paid, you know that you have capital, and the ability to just sit and think. That's a luxury. So I think I want to do more of that in the future, have a portfolio of companies probably in around e-commerce and beauty. I think that's a really great area to be in, a la Rihanna, to scale quickly and then et cetera. But that's what I'd be doing. That's what I'd be doing. Yeah, so again, my name is Abu Fofanah. That's Abu, Fofanah. I always got to spell it out. But you can find me on Instagram at Abu Fofanah, or on Twitter at the Abu Fofanah, or just check out my website, abufofanah.com. And the program that I'm currently running is called the Power Your Launch Marketing Accelerator. You can go to poweryourlaunch.com in order to learn more about it. And if you don't remember anything else, if you don't find me, I will find you, because you'll see my ads eventually, whether on Instagram, Facebook, whether on TikTok, whether on YouTube, dating apps, it don't matter, right? I will find you. But thank y'all so much for having me. Truly appreciate it. Grateful for this opportunity. And best of luck to you that's watching this on your journey, on your endeavors. It's not easy, right? It's not easy, but it's worth it, right? It's worth it.